In this video, we will be looking at various ways of making selections and masks based on color channels. When we work in an RGB color space, for example, our images are made up of three primary color channels, the red, green, and blue, plus the composite RGB channel, which is what we get when we combine the other three. We can view the individual channels in color, but by default, these are shown as grayscale images. Viewing the channels in grayscale makes it easier for us to see the luminosity of the channel without being distracted by the channel's color. The luminosity is very useful because it can be used as a basis for very detailed selections that would be difficult to make using other tools. In previous videos, when we were making masks, we were painting with either black or white. And we said that the white reveals and the black conceals, or whatever was white was going to show through, and whatever was black was going to be hidden. Now, the masks don't have to be purely black or white. They can contain grays as well. In this example, the grays indicate areas that are partially selected. A very dark gray will mostly hide the adjustment, but will allow some of it to show through. A very light gray will allow most of the adjustment to go through, but will also hide a small part of it. So let's have a look at the first practical example. Looking at these channels individually, we can see that the red channel has the most contrast. So if this was a mask, the toy buses would be mostly selected because they appear as light grays, and the background would be mostly deselected because it is mostly made up of dark grays. So let's take this red channel and turn it into a mask. We can do this in a number of ways. For example, we can simply right-click on the red channel and say Duplicate Channel, and we can give it a new name if you like and click OK. We could also Command-click onto the channel to load it as a selection, and then we could go to Select, Save Selection, and then we could again name this channel. Or if you just click OK, we will create a default alpha channel number 1. So alpha channels are channels that contain selections. They allow us to save selections that we can later retrieve and maybe also edit. Another way of saving a channel would be to click on the Save Selection as Channel icon. And then we would tick Color indicates masked areas. And then again, we end up with a copy of the red channel. Once we've done this, we can press Command D to deselect. Now, the selection is not perfect, but we can improve it. So we can use the dodge and burn tools. For example, if we use the burn tool and set its range to shadows and exposure to, let's say, about 80%, which is very strong, I can then increase the size of the burn tool and then start burning in the shadows because I want to increase the contrast of the mask, like this. Because this tool its range is limited to the shadows, it's not really going to affect the highlights that much, or these very bright midtones. Okay, so now I can switch to the dodge tool, set its range to highlights, and make these bright areas brighter, like this. So I'm not going to do all at once. I will go back and forth a little bit, like this. And again, because the range of this tool is limited to highlights, it's not really going to affect the shadows. Then I can go back to the burn tool and fix the windows like this. And in the end, I end up with a very precise and very contrasty mask. So now I can command click to load this alpha channel as a selection. I can turn the other channels back on, turn this one off, and then go to layers. And then, for example, I can make a curves adjustment layer and then maybe increase the contrast for the buses. In this example, our initial selection was based on the red channel. However, as we mentioned in the previous video, it is very interesting to note that the rendering of the grayscale image of an individual channel is affected by the grayscale working space we have selected in our color settings. We said that if you are using the general purpose or pre-press color settings preset, the gray working space is not going to match the gamma or the mid-tone contrast of the RGB space you are working in. These two color settings presets set the gray working space to the dot gain of 15%, which is significantly less contrasty compared to the gamma of 2.2 used by the sRGB and Adobe RGB color spaces. In other words, even though the grayscale setting does not affect the color of the image itself, it does affect the grayscale image we see in the channels panel, and in this way, the contrast of the masks we make from these channels. So in order to get the best masks from the channels, we should make sure to set our grayscale working space to gray gamma 2.2. In the previous example, we based our selection on the red channel. We have some shortcuts that we can use. So for example, if you press Command 3, you will be able to view red channel on its own. If you press Command 4, you see the green channel. Command 5 will show you the blue channel, and then Command 2 will show you the composite RGB channel. You can also select these channels using shortcuts. So if you press Command Option 3, you select the red channel. Then if you press Command Shift 4, you select the green channel. Command Option 5, you select the blue. And then if you press Command Option 2, you make a selection based on the luminosity of this channel. So this would be the same as if you went to mode and then converted this to grayscale. So this is the mask that you would end up with. So if you go back, I can press Command Option 2, and then if I go to layers, I can make an adjustment layer, curves, for example. Okay, so if I option click onto this layer, this is the mask I ended up with. And then let's say, for instance, that I wanted to make the highlights a little bit brighter without affecting the shadows and the midtones that much. So what I can do, I can fix this mask a little bit by using curves. So if I press Command M, I will bring up the curves adjustment, but in this instance, I'm not creating a curves adjustment layer, but instead I'm applying this adjustment straight to the mask. Okay, so maybe I can do something like this. I can increase the contrast. I can click OK. Maybe I can darken this part as well. Maybe I can burn this in like this. Because I thought this looked a little bit too bright, like this. So I can now option click again and then make an adjustment like this. And you can see that now I'm mostly affecting the highlights and am not touching the shadows that much. In this example, we can also, so far we've been looking at the RGB images. Let's say that we wanted to select the sky. So another thing that we could do, for instance, would be to go to image and duplicate this image like this, and then go to, so we are working with the copy now. We go to image, mode, and then change the mode from RGB to CMYK. Okay, and now we end up with a different set of channels. So we have the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So the reason why I did this is because I thought that the yellow channel may be slightly more contrasty than the blue channel in the RGB image. And may make a better basis for a selection. So let me just try to do this and see how it turns out. I'm going to right click and duplicate the channel and call it yellow copy. That's fine. Then I can go to the original file and go to select and then load selection. And then I'm going to select the copy document and then the yellow copy, which is the alpha channel we created inside of it. So we are basically transferring that alpha channel from the other document to this one, like this. And then we can option click and create a channel inside of this file. So we can deselect. Okay, and then again, I can use the curves to adjust the contrast. So Command M, like this. And this gives me a very contrasty mask that makes a very good selection of the sky. I can repeat the curves once again like this. And then again, I can use the dodge and burn tools to fix this mask a little bit in places. I'm going to select the bottom part with the polygonal lasso. And then fill this with black, like this. And then I can zoom in into some of these areas and then maybe again burn in all these bits. Like this. And for some of these, again, I can use the lasso. And then this selection doesn't have to be perfect. If you have lots of time, you can try to make it absolutely perfect, but these are minute details, so I don't think that you would even be able to see this in a print. But I'm going to try to do this quickly, like this. Okay, and again, I can press Command Backspace to fill this with black, deselect. Then I can zoom in onto these chimneys to this part. Then I'm going to use the lasso again. Maybe just like this. And for these, like this. And then maybe again burn in this bit. Okay, so this is the mask that I end up with. I can then press Command click. I can Command click on to this alpha channel, turn the other ones back on, turn this one off, go to layers, and then create a curved adjustment layer like this. And then maybe lighten the sky. Now, if we zoom in, you will see, and if I exaggerate this a little bit, like this, you'll see that these little bits have been selected. These parts of the chimneys have been selected. If you look at these towers here, you can see that these parts have also been selected. So this is the reason why you would use channels as a starting point for your masks, because you can make a very, very detailed selections that would be very difficult to make otherwise. If the mask looks a little bit too jagged, you can go into the properties panel of the mask itself, select the mask, and then maybe feather it a little bit like this to soften the edges. But I think I pushed this adjustment a little bit too far, so if you go down a bit, then I think the mask looks very good. Let's have a look at another way of making selections based on individual channels. So if you go to one of the previous examples, we said that we can load the channels by, for example, pressing Command Option 3. So this would load the red channel as a selection. Command Option 4 would load the green. Command Option 5 would load the blue channel. Command Option 2 would load the RGB composite channel. And we can also command click onto different channels to load them as selections. Once we do this, we can also add, subtract, or intersect channels. So for example, if I wanted to add the green channel to the red channel, I could press Command-Shift-Click like this. So this way I combine the two channels. If I was to select the red channel and then press Command-Option and then click onto the green, then I subtract the green channel from the red. And if I click on the red and then press Command-Option-Shift and click, then I make an intersection of the two channels. Now, the problem with this is that you don't get any visual feedback to see how these channels are combining. So there is a different way that we can do this. Let's copy the background channel by pressing Command J on the keyboard. And then if you go to the adjustments and then select Channel Mixer, if we tick on monochrome, we can now combine the different channels like this to try to make a mask that is as contrasty as possible. So remember, in the previous examples, we would take one channel as a selection, and then we would tweak it further later on. So we would use maybe the curves to increase the contrast and dodge and burn tools to fix our mask. So here we are basically doing the same thing. So you're trying to make a more contrasty mask to begin with, like this. Okay, so let's say that I'm happy with this. I can option click onto these two channels, right click and say merge layers. And then if I go to the channels, remember the shortcut Command Option 2 to load the composite RGB channel as a selection. Now I can turn this channel off because this was a helper layer just to help me to make a selection. I can then go to, let's say, adjustments, let's say brightness and contrast, and then I can make an adjustment. Maybe like this. I can again option click and use the same tools. So remember we said Command M to use the curves like this. And then I can also use dodge and burn tools just to tidy up this mask. Etc.